what's going on right now. The new report of Axis reporting that something is happening. Iran has just agreed the deal is coming between Iran and Oman. That means that they're gonna open up the Strait of Hormuz, which you look at the Iranian media, it says it's something else. They say it doesn't. If they reach some agreement, at some point they're gonna reach an agreement between Iran and Oman. I think that's close to happen, but it doesn't mean necessarily that they're going to open up the Strait of Hormuz because of that deal. The two don't come together. The two doesn't, the two doesn't, they don't, they're not related to each other. And because the opening of the Strait of Hormuz is connected to what's going on between Iran and the United States. What is your understanding of the current situation and the way that Donald Trump, we had Donald Trump, Marco Rubio, Scott Bessent, they all talking about the Strait is open. Today, we believe it seems that they're removing some sanctions on some parts of the IRGC. I don't know if that's correct. It wasn't confirmed by Iranians, but this is the rhetoric at least. The rumors are out. But what is your understanding of the current situation between Iran and the United States?
It's very difficult to know. I think we have to look at this. We have to have a bifurcated analysis here. We have the U.S. Story, the U.S. narrative, which is tailored, customized, it's custom made for the U.S. political market and for the Western media market and Western governments. Okay, and that's saying that that Donald Trump is in contact with the Iranians. He's working on a deal behind the scenes. We're in talks. They want to make a deal. We're very close to a deal. We've heard all this before, right? How many times over the last 6 months? So that's for the U.S., for the Western audience. That's for Donald Trump's political constituency. It's for the Western media. So that exists. It's real. It's in the virtual reality, of the Western political media complex. It's real in their reality, in their matrix. What's actually happening on the ground will be totally different. Okay, and so the reason the U.S. are doing this is important because they have to do this. They have to because this is their way of projecting to the world that they're in control. That they're in control of the Strait of Hormuz ultimately, and Iran will eventually have to bend to the will of the United States. That's what this is. And if they don't, then they're going to have to automatically defer to the Iranians, and they can't. They cannot politically. They absolutely can. This president cannot, will not. It doesn't matter how crazy he sounds, how insane he talks. He's talking about, people have been saying that we're not talking. It's a fake news and whatever. He's literally making up conversations with Iranian officials that haven't happened. And so it's like he, for instance, could interpret a text message between, Jared Kushner or Steve Witkoff with a Pakistani intermediary. As far as Donald Trump's concerned, we're in talks with the Iranians. That's it. And so that's how he has to sell that to his audience, his opposition, his base, U.S. media, and all of that. So much is riding on this, by the way, for Trump and for the U.S. So they have to always appear to be in control. And so the reality is they're looking at Oman as a Trojan horse. Okay. Oman and Iran. Oman is clearly the weaker party. The U.S. and the British already have a very strong foothold in that country. Okay, and when they're talking about Oman joint managing the strait with Iran, the translation in the U.S. is that if that moves forward, then the U.S. then usurps Oman and it becomes the U.S. joint managing the strait with Iran. That's the way the Americans are looking at this. Oman is just a little, roadblock, basically. Or they're like a little boat that they can take a ride on and then sink it and then just take over, whatever that position is. That's the way they look at it. Oman is expendable. And I'll tell you how expendable Oman is. It's very unlikely the United States will be able to take territory in Iran. Okay. It is, however, more likely that they could put boots on the ground in Oman. Okay. Just remember that going forward. And that would give them operational control over half of the straits. And that would be seen as a big, big win for Trump to the US audience. Just remember this. No one's talking about it, but that's not off the table. Oman's tried to stay neutral. They have a policy of neutrality, but they're not a very strong country. And left with no other options, that might be a distant option for the US down the road. Okay. They're already undermining Oman. They've been saying bad things about them. They've been almost making threats with them. Trump issued a tweet just a couple of days ago where he put Oman in quotations. Did you see that? That's an insult. So they're creating a narrative like maybe it's not a legitimate regime. You know, they're doing this to all kinds of countries. They're doing it to Spain, vis-a-vis Ceuta in Morocco, making statements that it's not Spanish, doesn't have a right to have it. Denmark and Greenland, many different examples of this. So this administration has zero respect for anyone's sovereignty, zero. Everybody and everything is a means to an end for this administration. Just remember that. So I'm just putting that down because I'm reading the signs and I'm seeing how little the U.S. have in terms of positions and how difficult it's going to be for them to come good on any of their threats. So they might engage in increasingly desperate acts and desperate moves in order to salvage some sort of a position to operate from. I personally, I have not seen any evidence that Iran has agreed to allow them to split incoming and outgoing traffic with Oman. I have not seen any evidence that that's confirmed. I see talk, we hear things, we see things on maybe it's being discussed, but is that a binding agreement or anything like that? I don't see that because I see giving Oman any administrative control over the Strait is going to open the door for U.S. abuse, quite frankly, because it has before. That's what the U.S. used to stage the provocations, which gave them the pretext for military escalation during that 13-day period which just passed us. It was by trying to manipulate the Omani waterways and directing traffic through those in order to create staged provocations, in order to escalate. And then Trump escalates and then does a threat of annihilation, then pulls back, then engages in fake negotiations, and then next will be an attack, you see, and then reneging on the deal, and then so agreeing on a deal and then pulling back, and then and then blaming the Iranians. We've seen this cycle now many times, many times, over and over again. And I think he feels he's good at it, and they can make a few billion in the process by playing the oil and stock markets. So they could run a few more cycles of this up through the midterms, and his inner circle make about $20 billion or whatever, and then just continue after the midterms and ramp up attacks on Iran. I don't see, Nima, I just don't see any solution in the near or midterms for this. I really don't. I don't see any political will for any kind of negotiated settlement in America. I just see all these intermittent tactics, head fakes, and sort of faux negotiation moves by the Trump administration. And it's not going to be a very productive and fruitful strategy, but it's all they have. It's all they have. So they're going to keep doing it. And I'll tell you why, is because this president does not want to go down to history as the U.S. president who withdrew from the Middle East and handed control to Iran. It won't happen under Trump's term. He'll do everything possible to prevent that. So, because what he'll want to do is blame it on the next Democratic president, because it's inevitable. But he doesn't want to make it a reality. So he'll do everything to disrupt, to sabotage, to deflect, to basically mayhem, and carry this out for the next 2 years. That's more likely what we think is going to happen in this, right now. So, but the media, Bloomberg today, Bloomberg's all very close to a deal. I just saw the headline come in my inbox. I'm like, what are you guys talking? They have nothing else to do. The mainstream media are just like, yeah, let's run with this. Trump's close to a deal. Let's do it again. We did it 20 times before. Let's just run it 21 times. So, that's what they do.
If you read the Iranian media and you read the media, the mainstream media in the West, it seems that they're totally different. They're talking about something else in Iran, and in the West, they're talking about the deal is coming, and any moment we're going to announce that. It's amazing, by the way, to look at the differences between the two. And I always, in my opinion, we have to consider the way the Iranians are talking about it. I have, during the war, since this conflict started, I have never heard, you know, any. I don't know why Donald Trump is not honest the way that he's behaving. I don't know if he's today, even with this new manipulation, they're trying to manipulate the market, but they don't understand these tricks are not working anymore. They're not there anymore. And nobody's going to be played by these tricks and these sort of rhetorics on their part. And on the other hand, is the way that the mainstream media, for example, CNN, we had talking about 80% of the interceptors being used during the war. Or Reuters yesterday reporting that the United States is literally, running out of offensive missiles, ATACMS, PRSMs. These are important because recently they have been using these missiles because they don't want to get close to the Iranian borders because of the improvement in the Iranian air defense system. You see, they're using more HIMARS to attack Iran, to the southern part, to the western part of Iran. But this is the reality for them. Patrick, how do you see the continuation? You mentioned that they want to continue this conflict because Donald Trump is incapable of accepting what has happened so far, the reality of what has happened. So how are they going to continue? Are they going to, with little conflicts in the West Asia between Saudi Arabia, and you look at what has happened between Saudi Arabia and Iraq? I think that's a point for us to understand why does Saudi Arabia need to attack Iraq? And when they said they were not behind that drone attack on their soil, they said that it was a official announcement on the part of the resistance in Iraq. They said that. And then you may see that Donald Trump is somehow seeing some sort of chaos together with Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel. Maybe one way to continue this conflict, it's going to be through these proxies or the government that they can manipulate in the region.
Yeah. Look, the attack on Abqaiq petroleum facility in Saudi Arabia, people say, oh, the Houthis took credit. I don't know if that's 100% officially the case. However, that was used as the justification for a U.S.-Saudi attack. And we've even heard some Iranian commentators saying that Saudi didn't attack Iraq. Those were all U.S. strikes. But they said publicly that it was Saudi and U.S., okay? That's very plausible. So what's going on here? Manipulation's going on. And we saw a false flag attack in Egypt on a U.S. LNG facility at Damietta just last week. So middle of last week. So no one took credit for it. Egyptians are still investigating. What's going on there? Was that an Israeli false flag attack designed to blame Yemen or Iran, pull Egypt into the fray? So there are attempts to widen this war very clearly, okay? Now, I believe that the aggression against Iraq is directly tied to the collapse of Iraqi Kurdistan, of U.S. and Israeli positions and clandestine operations in the KRG and Erbil. They've been able to have almost carte blanche to operate with impunity there since almost the first Gulf War. Okay, the U.S. and the Israelis have built up a very vast network of stations and other operations, and also proxies and armed groups that terrorist groups or Kurdish militants that they believe they can deploy, Israeli intelligence facilities and so forth, all that were used operationally to attack Iran, by the way, in February, and also during the riots in January of or early this year in 2026. So some of those operations were run out of northern Iraq. So the fact that that's collapsing, that's huge, because that was an absolute essential uh, rallying and staging ground to attack Iran on many, many different levels. And now you're looking at a situation where that's off the table. So if that's off the table, and those would be a lot of covert operations in Erbil, and and Iran's well aware of all of these operations now, and they've been eliminating them one by one over the last couple of weeks without very much coverage in the Western media, by the way. You don't see a lot of coverage of this, but it's happening. That plus the loss of U.S. facilities and capabilities around the Persian Gulf, even problems with Israel now. Problems with Israel requesting the U.S. remove their C-130 air-to-air refueling tankers from Ben Gurion Airport and other visible potential targets in an Iranian retaliation. So Jordan, that's problematic. The Gulf states are problematic. Iraqi Kurdistan's problematic. What's left? What's left for America? Like, even if they have ATACMS or HIMARS, where are they going to station them? They're going to fire from the UAE? Well, that's not going to work either, because they're going to be hit by the Iranians, and hit hard if they do it that way, as the Kuwaiti bases have been hit. So just see, the options are more and more limited. So now we're back to standoff munitions. We're back to cruise missiles, submarines, long-range bombing runs from European bases, basically. That's kind of like where we're at. Now, there's also probably active efforts to stage attacks from perhaps Turkmenistan, possibly. It's a big country, very difficult to police.
If I'm not mistaken, they have HIMARS in that country, Turkmenistan.
Well, yeah, there you go. There you go. So that's a name I will put up there as a potential aggressor nation that's going to facilitate attacks. Maybe less so Tajikistan. I don't think is much of a threat. Also, Russia has a strong influence in some of these former or CIS countries and former Soviet countries. But then the United States also has influence and access to some of these countries as well. So I don't know the profiles so well of all these countries, but it just seems to me geographically that if Azerbaijan, it's for Azerbaijan, it's politically extremely volatile to allow their country to be used as a staging ground to attack Iran. Not only pressure from Moscow to ward them off of this, but also direct retaliation from Iran, which would be indefensible, inexcusable for the Azeris, inexcusable. And ditto with Armenia, with the U.S. Puppet regime there, and all their operations there. However, maybe Turkmenistan, maybe not so much. So, but they're running out of options, Nima. The U.S. they had so many options to attack Iran back in February. I mean, unlimited, and they did deal a very devastating blow to the Iranians in terms of leadership that was assassinated, not just the supreme leader, but heads of the military and the IRGC and scientists, and the intellectual capacity of the country was also hit hard there. So, but all of these were done from all of these different near staging grounds, and Iraqi Kurdistan being the worst. So nobody, they can't do anything. They're not. The KRG is not going to get any assistance from Baghdad on this. Nothing. They're on their own, and they've made their bed, and they're going to have to lie in it. And the Kurds have been in bed with the Israelis and the Americans unashamedly and taking the money for decades. And this is where it ends, basically. And that's what the nation building project was all about from the beginning. You remember? In the first Gulf War, it started with a no-fly zone, and that became Iraqi Kurdistan, one of those three quadrants. And the rest is history. And the U.S. and Israel have been colonizing that for decades and used it for all sorts of nefarious activities. So that's one thing I'll say. So, but I think, Nima, just not to belabor the point, but I think trying to drag or punish Iraq is I think directly related to that situation, I would say.